Stephon Gilmore is a little bit different, a lot older, much shorter term deal. Aiden, do you like the idea of bringing him into San Francisco?
I like the idea of Gilmore coming in a lot more. He's a guy who I think would start right away and gives Ambry Thomas time to develop. He doesn't need because if we don't bring in like a veteran that's going to start over Ambry, he has a ton of pressure going into this year to take another step forward and to be the guy that he was down the stretch last year. So bringing in a guy like Gilmore would give him a little bit of time to kind of figure out where he is in this league because corner's tough year over year. Like you are going to get beat more often than you're going to make a play, which is a really weird reality that you have to live with. But Gilmore's in a really weird spot because he's at the point where you would expect him to want to play for a competing team, but he forced his way out of New England last year, came home to the Panthers. He's from the South Carolina area, like 25 minutes, 30 minutes south of Charlotte. So I could definitely see him being like, I've won my Super Bowl. It's time to sign one more contract with the Panthers, make 30 more million, and ride off into the sunset. Or he might be like, I want to win. So no idea where his head's at, but he's a guy that I like more than JC Jackson just because it's a shorter term deal. I don't think you could get JC Jackson on a 2 year, $20 million deal. I think he wants the security long term, but I think you could get Gilmore for 2 for 30 or something like that. And that's obviously a little bit pricey. We need to see how the Niners cap figures end up working out, but I still think he's a very, very solid corner. He makes the 49ers a better team. And it'd be really interesting. And I would like that more than I would like the JC Jackson signing.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you that I think this one makes a little bit more sense for where the 49ers are at and where they have a lot of their money as well. Um, but the big question for me is the injury history, the age. He's almost 32. He's missed significant time over the last couple of years. And I still do think he's a solid corner, but with the amount of time that he's missed, I don't think signing him to a 2-year, $30 million deal is worth it if you're the 49ers. Now, I also think that's probably the market for him. That's what Spotrac has too. I think they have two years, like 28.5, I think it is. So I think that's about right in terms of what he's going to be asking for. But once again, you're paying a guy a lot of money that's an older player that could potentially just not really play many games. So I'm just not a big fan of going out there and signing a corner to a big deal. I think this year for the 49ers, the priority should be re-signing Deebo Samuel and re-signing Nick Bosa, or extending, not re-signing. But I think that's the best thing they can do. And then make a lot of smaller moves to add some depth in this room, add some depth to that defensive line. Because I just don't see like them going after one of those guys making the biggest difference in the world. I think, and if you can, like if you're able to go get a top end corner, yeah, like you could, but I just don't know if that's the best spot to put their assets. I think you also have a couple offensive line questions this year. You might potentially need to go get someone if Aaron Banks doesn't look like he's that guy to start. Um, I don't think outside of that on offense, I don't think there's a lot of spots to spend on offense. So I guess like you could look at this and go, okay, well, they could either go get a second pass rusher, they could go get a top end corner. And a lot of people are going to say, I wanted them to go get the top end corner because of all the struggles there. But if you go sign 2-3 corners that are vets that are pretty solid, that are cheap, you can like live with Ambry Thomas starting and then have a depth guy beneath him or have a couple depth guys beneath him. So I just think that's a better move. I just would be afraid if you go and get Gilmore that you go and sign Gilmore and he plays 5 games for you and then you basically have like $10 million lost if you're looking at like from a games perspective. And that's just kind of like, all right, well, we didn't really get much out of Gilmore. He didn't play. I do like it more though than signing JC Jackson just because JC Jackson is such a bigger deal. Also, that does not mean I don't think JC Jackson's better. I think at this point in their career, JC Jackson is better, but he's just getting a significantly larger contract than that. One other thing I'd add, a 2-year, $30 million deal. How much of that is going to the cap hit? How much of that is incentive based? Because if it's a heavy incentive based contract, I could definitely get behind that. If he's only affecting like $6 to $8 million of cap each year, okay, that's totally fine. Because if they get him and he doubles his contract because he plays well, you pay him that every single time when he goes out there and he plays like an all-pro caliber player like he has in the past. So if it's a deal like that, and maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's the difference of him going to Carolina or him coming to San Francisco, is that they're going to give him that incentive-based deal. Incentive-based deal, yes, give him that. I'm down with that. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But anything that you want to add to these potential cornerback signings before we shift into Jimmy Ward's potential contract extension?
No, I think you hit it. I think that we need a couple more depth pieces. I would rather get 3 guys at that 5 million number than Gilmore for 15, even if he hits that perfect all pro thing. I think you need more depth. And I think Eric Crocker had a really interesting point last week talking about how every corner is going to get beat. Like Jalen Ramsey got cooked in the NFC Championship and in the Super Bowl, and they won both of those games. And he was a significant reason why, even though he gave up touchdowns, he gave up catches, maybe had a pass interference that the Bengals got away with. But that's a top flight corner who struggled and his team won despite it. So I'm definitely a proponent of let's get as many solid guys in the room as possible and take the pressure off of the young guys that are really trying to still figure out where they fit in. So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah, final thing I want to bring up on the cornerback room before we get into Jimmy is I think that one thing that kind of gets forgotten is that this cornerback class also isn't thought of to be a very strong one. And especially in like the middle rounds, where a lot of times you see a bunch of corners where it's like, oh yeah, this guy could start. He's a day two guy. Asante Samuel Jr. last year was a guy like that who the Chargers ended up taking. That apparently the Niners were all over getting him, and then it didn't work out. But this cornerback class doesn't also seem like one like that. So maybe even a Stephon Gilmore like short-term 2-year deal where it's super incentive based makes even more sense, considering that the Niners might feel like even if we take a guy in the second day, he's not going to be ready to start. And maybe they strike out on a couple depth pieces and then this is what they go and do. So I think there's a much larger chance that Stephon Gilmore signed. I think there's basically a 0% chance that JC Jackson signed to the 49ers. And like, yes, maybe if you just look at the Niners, like raw cap numbers, they could afford him, but they would have zero flexibility. And that's not something that the Niners have done in the past, especially with this, Lynch Shanahan regime. Parag is not a guy that wants to have no flexibility there. So I would really doubt that. But Stephon Gilmore, let's see what he gets. Let's see what his market is coming off of an injury, coming off of 2 back-to-back injury years. It might not be as big as Spotrac is expecting, and maybe he gets signed for a lot less. So I think only time will tell with kind of what the market is for that. And this could be potentially be a guy that, because we've talked about Stephon Gilmore in the past, throughout this offseason, we might continue to talk about him a lot just to see like, okay, is there rumors here? Because I think there very well could be. And the 49ers are definitely a team that a lot of vets want to come. And if they're trying to win, this is a spot where we've seen guys kind of push their way to come here. We saw Trent Williams do that a couple years ago, where he really made the extra effort to come here and get it done. And then he also did that when he re-signed with the 49ers, as the Chiefs had a very competitive offer that he ultimately decided to come back to San Francisco. So time will tell with Stephon Gilmore, but I highly doubt JC Jackson is going to be a 49er.